Oh man, here we go again. So, after the original release of Metroid, both in Japan and North America, Gunpei Yokoi and the rest of R&D1 were hard at work on a bunch of different games ranging from the Famicom Detective Club games, of which some of them were just recently re-released, and Dr. Mario. Talk about a bit of a wide range, eh? Nothing like solving murders and or mysteries and then following that up with a rousing game of... Anyway, at some point during all that development, they felt like trying their hand at another Metroid game. So, what do you think the best way to make a sequel would be? After all that time spent developing on the Famicom or NES, you would think that they'd be able to tap into all the latent power of the system and really push it to its limits. For example, at this point, Super Mario Bros. 3 was already out, and that was probably one of, if not the most impressive looking game on the system. Maybe, just maybe, they could push Metroid in that same way. But you'd be wrong. You put that on the Game Boy. Hell yeah, look at that color, look at that range. The power of 8 bits, kinda. Right in your very large brick of a portable system. At any rate, welcome back, friends. My name is Leon, and it's time to jump back into the Metroid Retrospective. So let's talk a little bit about the development here, alright? Metroid II was developed by Nintendo's R&D1 team, just like the last game was, with the help of Intelligent Systems. Leading the charge was Hiroji Kiyotake as director, lead designer Makoto Kano, lead programmer Takahiro Harada, with the help, of course, of Gunpei Yokoi as the producer. Yokoi, being the creative force he was, developed the Game Boy, and one can only assume that the reason they put a Metroid sequel on that specific hardware was because he was at the helm of both projects. Alright, side tangent here, I couldn't really find any actual information about this. I spent a long time trying to find up specific details onto why they put Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, but I was just coming up short. And I gotta release this video eventually, so I know what they say about assuming, but I've got nothing else to go off of here. So let's just say they were feeling ambitious, to say the least. Suffice to say, Metroid was going to be just a little bit different on a Game Boy than it was on the Nintendo. When we last left off in the Metroid timeline so far, Samus was just leaving her adoptive home planet of Zebes. She had just blown up the space pirate fortress that was there and destroyed any and all space pirates and Metroids that she came into contact with. Now, excluding some 3D entries that may have taken place after Samus made her great escape from Zebes, we find her being contracted by the Federation to go to another planet, SR-388. As it turns out, this is the Metroid homeworld. The only reason we know that is because a research team and then a search and rescue team were sent to that planet, but went dark, presumed to be KIA thanks to the Metroids that exist there. Federation, with their backs to the wall, need to send in somebody to clean up their mess, and they chose the only person in the known galaxy who's capable of destroying the Metroids, Samus. It's now up to Samus to find and exterminate all the Metroids on planet SR-388. So how does this one compare? Well, for starters, the intro screen is pretty great. Not in its functionality, it's literally a press start and go kind of a thing. But the music changes after hanging out on the title for just a bit. That's something that's special, and it fits in with how I think this game is viewed. More on that later, however. We really got to get into it. Ooh, man, what a change. And not just on the color front. I mean, yeah, it's black and white, or monochrome green if you're on the OG Game Boy. But man, what a push. For all of its lack of color, the detail is leagues above the original game. Samus herself is big and bold on the screen, and that's pretty great. That said, it is still a Game Boy game, and with that comes the crunch. No, not development crunch. Screen crunch. Check out that zoom in. Can't see anything that's not already right in your face. B-E-A beautiful. So I mean, that's something. Outside of that, believe it or not, the game works fairly well given its limitations. Samus can now crouch and shoot, as well as shoot straight downward. Now that is progress. This is actually something that you come across pretty early in the game. It teaches you to shoot down only a few screens in. This is important knowledge, as many of the creatures you find are laying pretty low to the ground. Oh, and hey, check that out in the bottom of the screen. You see that? You have all your info. Health, missile ammo, and a Metroid counter. Fun fact that not a lot of people know about. But if you pause the game, the counter gives you a breakdown of all the Metroids that are left in this single area, instead of the whole total. Speaking of, either the Metroids don't reproduce very quickly, or the planet is incredibly tiny, because the counter says there's only 39 in total. And of those 39 Metroids, you fight 15, a little less than half of the total population, in their alpha form. Yeah, these little bastards. They aren't terribly difficult. Hell, you don't even need the ice beam for them. Just missiles. And that's true for all the variants. The alphas, the gammas, the zetas, and the omegas. Minus, of course, the base form Metroids, which you still need the ice beam for. Hope you don't get tired of these guys, by the way. They're the only bosses in the game. Well, save for two. The Queen, and this guy, Arachnus, who is immune to all damage, except morph ball bombs for some reason. His one weakness! Repetition is the name of the game here. Right, here we go. Get into an area. Kill all the Metroids. The screen shakes. The counter goes crazy. Another lava pit opens somewhere. Go deeper in. Repeat until victory. That said, some of these Metroids are just a pain to fight. They all fly somehow. Once you get into Zeta and above, forget it. Forget it! They're only weak to missiles to the dome. That's right. Headshots. And they can dish out large chunks of damage. Plus, some of the arenas you're expected to fight in are not at all interested in giving you a fair fight. If you leave the screen, everything resets. Health, reset. Terrain you might have cleared out, reset. Everything gets reset. Speaking of terrain, the Metroids don't give a good goddamn about it. They fly right through it. Unless it's a hard wall. They can't pass through those. On a side note though, I will say it's pretty neat to see the shells that they have cast off. Like they grow out of their larval form, their base form, and they leave behind their big old Metroid shell. That's pretty neat. Like that environmental storytelling touch. That's nice. It's kind of like a warning. To say that this game was streamlined is a bit of an understatement. Given the design and the portable nature they were aiming for, they had to limit what the objectives were. You couldn't just toss the player into an elaborate maze that was Zebes on 4 AA batteries. That said, saving was introduced for the game. And the save stations that they put in the game are, well, reasonably spaced out. Along with that were the series' first recharge stations, both for missiles and health. I just wish that there were a few more of them scattered throughout the map. Because more than a few times, I ran out of missiles and I had to backtrack a very long way to get a refill, and those things were not close. Like in the last area where you're fighting a bunch of Omegas, I ran out of missiles, and there are no enemies to replenish your supply, and the enemies in this game just refuse to drop missiles anyway for some reason. So instead of, organically getting my missile count back up through gameplay, I had to stop what I was doing, run all the way back, like 2 or 3 zones, and refill. Yikes. Just, oh my god, that was, a little frustrating. But it's because of this simplified structure that the game's main objective was basically a simple countdown. It's also why you spend way too much time hunting the same few variants of Metroid over and over again. They had to get as much out of this little gray cartridge as possible. This is also why Samus got her famous huge shoulders in this game. You see, in the first game, when she got her various suit power-up, it was notated with a change in her color. But they couldn't do that here, obviously, it's the Game Boy. So instead, they changed her suit physically. Just enough. The larger sprites on the screen allowed for that kind of a detail to be shown, and that noted a change in her power. Streamlined. Alright, it's worth talking about here. Okay, a few years back, Mercury Steam made a remake of Return of Samus, named Samus Returns. I know, clever. It marked an important turnaround point in a long dormant series up to that point. If I had a proper way to record the footage, I would love to talk about it more, but for now, just know that this is probably the best way to play the game and still support the series as a whole, if you manage to find a new copy of it. The game's a few years old now, odds are probably not. And I say probably the best way, because out in the ether of the internet exists another Metroid II remake, or as it's known, AM2R. This was hit with a cease and desist order from Nintendo about a year or so before Samus Returns came out, and as such, it's not really available anymore, is what I would say if the internet isn't forever. You can still find the game out there if you take the time to jump through a few hoops, and honestly, I gotta say, it is worth it. If you enjoy any of the Game Boy Advance games like Zero Mission or Fusion, then you need to take some time to find and play this. Is it better than Samus Returns? Yes and no. Honestly, they're both two sides of the same coin. They both have their ups and downs. Honestly, I wouldn't mind taking some time to talk about AM2R as well as Samus Returns once we get through the other games. Just know that AM2R is a Metroid game for Metroid fans by Metroid fans. Ah, here we are. The end draws ever closer. So, once you destroy all the Metroids on the planet, you get the number 1 flashing in the bottom corner. 1 left. 1 more to go. Make your way through ruins of some kind, some sort of research facility, and above you, you see an egg. The counter flashes, and suddenly you have a few more Metroids to take out. Looking like they did back in Turian in Metroid 1. Flash freeze them and blow them away with missiles. The counter now rests at 1 again. Jump into the pit and fight the Queen. She's a big one. So big, in fact, she could swallow Samus in her morph ball form. Why would you be in morph ball form? Well, that's easy. So you can lay bombs in the queen's stomach. Blow her up from the inside out. This fight is a fairly tough one if you aren't fully prepared for it, and or if you have trouble with missile management. But once you do enough damage, the queen dissolves away. And all that's left is one single egg. It hatches. And instead of taking it down right then and there, Samus lets it go. The Metroid hovers around her. The baby Metroid imprints itself on Samus, follows her back to her ship. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. And that is Metroid II: Return of Samus. Is it perfect? No. God, no. Not even close. This is another instance where I would heavily recommend playing the official remake and or AM2R instead. You don't have to deal with the screen crunch and the awkward controls, because while these controls are leaps and bounds better than the original Metroid on the NES, they're still pretty rough to deal with. You also don't have to deal with the odd musical choice, if you can even really call this music. I know I didn't really bring it up earlier, but yikes, the music in this version is rough. Just a bunch of beeps and boops for the most part. And while it's, quote, atmospheric, the Game Boy wasn't really known for its musical prowess. With all that said, though, it brings me back to the intro screen. If you stick with it, and you let it do its own thing, you find that it has something special to offer. Just give it a bit of time, and you might notice something truly special. Metroid is a series that still has some searching to do in terms of finding its rhythm. But by the next time we talk about Metroid evolves into something super. If you've made it this far into the video, then you have reached the end card. I appreciate you sticking it out with me this far. If you like where this is going, then stick around. We got more coming. I'm on this huge Metroid kick right now, and the train doesn't stop yet. As always, you can find me here on YouTube. I'd appreciate a like and or sub if you haven't already. And if you need more, you can follow me on my socials. Those are down in the doobly-doo below. I appreciate you hanging out with me here, and I'll see you next time.